The grand ceremonial plaza of Celestia Prime had been transformed into a spectacular amphitheater for the Feast of Stellar Alignment, an event that occurred only once every 1,000 years when the Empire's 3 capital worlds achieved perfect astronomical alignment. Representatives from all 10,000 systems had gathered to witness the ceremony, their diverse forms creating a living tapestry of galactic civilization. High above the plaza, on the sacred platform that had hosted imperial ceremonies for 8 centuries, Emperor Maximilian IX stood in robes of shimmering quantum fabric that reflected the light of distant stars. The 3 moons of Celestia Prime hung like cosmic jewels in the purple sky, their combined gravitational influence creating tidal effects that made the very air shimmer with potential energy. Cardinal Thessarian took his place at the Emperor's right hand, his scarlet robes marking him as the highest religious authority in the Empire. To observers in the plaza below, he appeared calm and composed, every inch the devoted servant of imperial tradition. But beneath his ceremonial vestments, his hands trembled with the weight of what he was about to attempt. The consecrated blade hidden in his sleeve had been blessed by the conclave of cardinals and inscribed with prayers for the preservation of all life in the galaxy. If the ancient texts were correct, if the blessing held true, the weapon would be capable of piercing even the dimensional barriers that the Old Ones might use to protect their chosen vessel. Citizens of the Intergalactic Empire. The Emperor's voice boomed across the plaza, amplified by gravitational wave transmitters that carried his words to every system in real time. Tonight we celebrate not merely an astronomical alignment, but the dawn of a new age of imperial power and cosmic understanding. In the IS Vigilance, orbiting high above the ceremony, Captain Janice Corwell watched the proceedings with the intensity of a predator waiting to strike. Her team had identified 17 different security vulnerabilities in the plaza's defensive arrangements, any one of which could be exploited to assist the Cardinal's mission if circumstances required intervention. "Torres," she said quietly, "report on palace security status." "Internal intelligence units are maintaining standard ceremonial protocols, Captain. However, I'm detecting unusual energy signatures from the Emperor's personal protection systems. It appears he's activated defensive measures beyond normal parameters." On her tactical display, Janice could see the invisible force fields and quantum barriers that surrounded the sacred platform like layers of an electronic onion. The Emperor had clearly taken precautions against exactly the kind of close-range attack that Cardinal Thessarian was planning. "Does the Cardinal have any chance of penetrating those defenses?" Major Chen asked from her position at the weapons console. "Unknown," Torres replied. "The consecrated blade he's carrying appears to incorporate technology that I don't recognize. The energy signatures are unusual." Dr. Vasquez leaned forward, studying the readings. "Captain, those energy patterns suggest quantum manipulation on a scale that shouldn't be possible with current technology. Either the Cardinal has access to experimental weapons systems, or he's using something that operates on principles we don't understand." Below, the Emperor continued his address, his words taking on an increasingly grandiose tone. "For too long, our empire has been confined to the mundane limitations of conventional space-time. But tonight, as the cosmic forces align in perfect harmony, we shall transcend those boundaries and claim our rightful place among the powers that rule reality itself." Cardinal Thessarian felt the weight of cosmic responsibility settling upon his shoulders as he listened to the Emperor's words. Each sentence confirmed his worst fears about the depth of alien influence that had corrupted the imperial mind. The man speaking to the galaxy was no longer truly human. He had become a mouthpiece for entities whose very existence threatened the fabric of reality. "The great work of dimensional expansion shall commence at the moment of perfect alignment," the Emperor continued, his voice taking on an otherworldly resonance that made several sensitive species in the audience physically uncomfortable. "Project Voids I will open gateways to realms of unlimited power, ensuring the Empire's dominance for all eternity." In the plaza below, most of the assembled representatives assumed they were witnessing the announcement of some new military technology or strategic initiative. But among the crowd, Senator Valdres, Senator Corvin, and Senator Moran exchanged grim looks, understanding the true implications of the Emperor's words. The moment had come. Cardinal Thessarian stepped closer to the Emperor, ostensibly to assist with the ceremonial activation of the stellar alignment display. But as he moved, his hand found the grip of the consecrated blade, and he whispered a prayer that had been old when the Empire was young. Sacred forces of creation, guide my hand in service of all life. Let this act serve not vengeance, but preservation. The blade slid from its sheath with a whisper of displaced air, its quantum-forged edge gleaming with inner light. For a moment, Thessarian hesitated, looking at the man who had ruled the Empire for 4 decades, who had been both just and wise before the cosmic corruption took hold. Then he struck. The consecrated blade pierced the Emperor's personal force fields like they were mere illusion, its quantum edge cutting through defensive barriers that should have been impenetrable. The point found its target with surgical precision, penetrating the Emperor's chest just below the heart. But instead of blood, something else entirely flowed from the wound, a viscous darkness that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The substance writhed and twisted as if it possessed independent life, and from within its depths came sounds that no human throat could produce. Impossible! The Emperor gasped, but his voice had changed, become a harmony of tones that spoke of vast spaces between stars. The barriers were absolute. No mortal weapon could. The blessing of 1,000 murdered worlds compels thee, Thessarian said, pressing the blade deeper. By the authority of life itself, I banish thee back to the void. The effect was immediate and catastrophic. The Emperor's body convulsed as competing forces, human consciousness and alien influence, struggled for control. The quantum fabric that made up his ceremonial robes began to unravel, revealing glimpses of geometries that hurt to observe directly. On the IS Vigilance, every sensor array screamed warnings as dimensional distortions rippled outward from the sacred platform. Captain! Torres shouted over the alarms. Massive space-time disruption detected. The dimensional barriers around the Emperor are collapsing. Can you determine the nature of the distortion? Janice demanded. Dr. Vasquez was studying the readings with growing alarm. Captain, it appears that the alien influence was more deeply integrated with the Emperor's physiology than we suspected. The blade isn't just severing the connection, it's causing some kind of dimensional feedback loop. On the sacred platform, Cardinal Thessarian felt reality itself beginning to crack around him. The Emperor's form was shifting, becoming something that existed in more dimensions than human perception could process. But through the chaos, he could hear the sound of dimensional barriers snapping back into place, the alien influence being forcibly expelled from normal space-time. The great work cannot be stopped. The Emperor wheezed, but his voice was becoming more human with each word. They showed me such wonders, such power. And such lies, Thessarian replied, maintaining his grip on the blade despite the cosmic forces trying to tear him apart. The Old Ones have never offered anything but extinction disguised as transcendence. Below in the plaza, panic was beginning to spread as the assembled representatives realized that something had gone catastrophically wrong with the ceremony. But before mass hysteria could take hold, the dimensional distortions suddenly ceased, leaving an eerie calm in their wake. Emperor Maximilian IX collapsed to his knees, the alien influence finally purged from his system. For the first time in months, his eyes showed the clarity of undamaged human consciousness. But the damage to his body from the dimensional extraction was severe. Blood, genuine human blood, was flowing freely from multiple wounds that seemed to exist in several dimensions simultaneously. Cardinal, he whispered, his voice weak but unmistakably his own. What have I done? The project, the entities, they showed me visions of glory, but I can see now, see what they really intended. Thessarian knelt beside the dying emperor, cradling the man who had been both his sovereign and, ultimately, the greatest threat to galactic civilization. You fought them at the end, Majesty. The human spirit within you never fully surrendered. Project Void's Eye. The Emperor gasped. The dimensional cascade, it's been programmed to activate automatically at the moment of perfect alignment. Even my death won't stop it now. Cardinal Thessarian felt his blood turn to ice. In their focus on eliminating the alien influence, they had forgotten that the Old Ones would have prepared for the possibility of the Emperor's death. The dimensional breaches would activate as planned, regardless of who controlled the Imperial throne. "Where are the control systems?" he demanded. "How can the project be stopped?" But Emperor Maximilian IX had already given his final breath, taking the location of Project Void's Eye's central controls with him to whatever realm awaited the souls of compromised rulers. Above them, the three moons reached perfect alignment, and across the galaxy, devices that had been constructed in secret began to hum with power that should not have existed in any rational universe. The assassination had succeeded, but the cosmic catastrophe it was meant to prevent was beginning anyway. "Captain, we're detecting massive energy buildups from 17 different star systems," Torres reported, his voice tight with barely controlled panic. "The dimensional breach devices are activating according to some kind of predetermined sequence." Janice Corwell stared at the tactical display showing energy spikes across the galaxy as Project Void's Eye began its final phase. The Old Ones had prepared for every contingency, including the possibility that their chosen vessel might be eliminated before the project's completion. "Time until dimensional cascade reaches critical threshold?" she demanded. "Based on current energy accumulation rates, approximately 4 hours and 37 minutes, Dr. Vasquez replied, her fingers flying over quantum calculation arrays. "But Captain, once the cascade begins, the dimensional barriers will weaken exponentially. We could see partial reality breakdown within the first hour." On the sacred platform below, Cardinal Thessarian was cradling the Emperor's body while the three senators rushed to his side. The plaza had erupted into chaos as representatives from 10,000 worlds struggled to understand what they had witnessed. But Thessarian's attention was focused on the dying man's final words about automatic activation sequences. "Senators," he called out as Valdris, Corvin, and Morin reached the platform. "The Emperor said the project would activate automatically. We need to access the Imperial databases immediately." Senator Corvin activated her emergency communication device. "Emergency session of the Senate is hereby called to order. As the senior surviving legislative authority, I invoke emergency powers under Article 7 of the Imperial Constitution." "What about succession protocols?" Senator Morin asked. "Without a designated heir, the Empire could fragment into civil war." "First things first," Valdris said grimly. "If we can't stop Project Void's Eye, there won't be an Empire left to govern." Aboard the IS Vigilance, Janice made a command decision that would have been unthinkable 6 hours earlier. "Open a secure channel to the sacred platform. It's time to stop pretending we're not involved in this." "Ma'am?" Torres looked uncertain. "The galaxy is about to end, Commander. Protocol seems somewhat irrelevant under the circumstances." The holographic image of Cardinal Thessarian appeared above the ship's communication console, his scarlet robe stained with the Emperor's blood and his face etched with cosmic exhaustion. "Your Eminence," Janice began. "This is Captain Corwell of Internal Intelligence. I assume you can hear me?" "Captain," Thessarian replied, not seeming particularly surprised by the contact. "I trust you've been monitoring the situation?" "We have. And we're prepared to assist in stopping Project Void's Eye, if such a thing is possible." "Do you have access to the Imperial classified databases?" "Limited access. But we might be able to penetrate deeper security layers if we knew what we were looking for." On the platform, Senator Corvin leaned into the communication pickup. "Captain, this is Senator Corvin. Under emergency authority, I'm granting you and your team unlimited access to all Imperial systems. Authorization Code Omega-77 Alpha." Torres began immediately working to access the deepest levels of the Imperial database network. "Captain, I'm detecting 43 separate control nodes for Project Void's Eye scattered across 17 star systems. But there appears to be a primary coordination center, location unknown. The Emperor's private laboratory," Cardinal Thessarian said suddenly. "He mentioned it once during a ceremony. A facility so classified that even the conclave of cardinals wasn't informed of its existence." Dr. Vasquez pulled up architectural scans of the Imperial Palace complex. "I'm not seeing any space large enough to house the kind of equipment this project would require." "It wouldn't be in the palace," Senator Valdris said, joining the conversation. If the Emperor wanted absolute secrecy, he would have constructed it somewhere completely separate from all known Imperial facilities. Major Chen had been studying the energy transmission patterns from the activated devices. Captain, I'm detecting quantum entanglement resonance between all 17 systems and a point approximately 3 light-years from here, in the Void Nebula. The energy signature is massive. The Void Nebula? Cardinal Thessarian looked stricken. Of course. The Emperor claimed he was establishing a meditation retreat there, a place where he could commune with cosmic forces without distraction. But he was really building the primary control center. How long would it take to reach the Void Nebula? Janice asked. At maximum slipstream velocity, approximately 3 hours and 40 minutes. Torres calculated. But Captain, we'd be cutting it extremely close to the cascade threshold. And that's assuming we can figure out how to shut down the system once we reach it. Major Chen added. We have no idea what we'll be facing. Dr. Vasquez had been running probability calculations on her personal system. There's another factor to consider. If the Old Ones have been planning this for months, they may have anticipated the possibility of interference. The control center could be heavily defended, both by conventional security and by other means. Dimensional guardians, Cardinal Thessarian said grimly. The ancient texts speak of entities that exist partially outside normal space-time, serving as protectors for Old One installations. If the Emperor was guided to construct such defenses, then we'll deal with that when we encounter it, Janice said with more confidence than she felt. Right now, we're the only force in position to attempt this mission. Senator Corvin, can you coordinate with the other systems to provide support? I'll contact the fleet commanders immediately. But Captain, most of our ships would take days to reach the Void Nebula. You'll be operating alone. Janice looked around at her crew, seeing her own grim determination reflected in their faces. Then we'd better make sure we succeed on the first try. Torres, plot a course for the Void Nebula and engage slipstream drive. Everyone else, begin preparing for the most important mission of our lives. As the IS Vigilance shifted into the quantum foam that allowed faster-than-light travel, Janice activated the ship's internal communication system. All hands, this is the captain. We are proceeding to prevent a threat that could result in the extinction of all intelligent life in the galaxy. I won't lie to you, the odds are against us, and we may not survive the attempt. But if we fail, no one survives. For the Empire, for civilization, for the future itself, we will not fail. The ship's quantum drive hummed with power as they raced through the void toward a confrontation that would determine the fate of reality itself. Behind them, on Celestia Prime, Cardinal Thessarian and the 3 senators worked frantically to coordinate whatever support they could provide while maintaining order in an empire that had just lost its emperor under the most dramatic circumstances imaginable. And in the spaces between dimensions, the Old Ones waited with patient anticipation for the barriers to weaken sufficiently to allow their return. They had waited for eons. They could wait a few hours more. Soon, very soon, they would reclaim the reality that had been taken from them, and all the younger races would learn the meaning of true cosmic order. But they had not counted on the determination of beings who understood that sometimes, the greatest act of loyalty is knowing when to break your oath in service of a higher truth. The race against oblivion had begun. The IS Vigilance dropped out of slipstream drive at the edge of the Void Nebula, a vast region of space where normal matter had been scoured away by some ancient catastrophe, leaving behind only the churning quantum foam that marked the boundaries between dimensions. At the nebula's heart, their sensors detected an artificial structure that defied conventional understanding of physics and engineering. My God! Dr. Vasquez whispered as the main screen displayed their destination. It's enormous! The structure that appeared before them was less a space station than a geometrical impossibility, a complex of interconnected spheres and angular projections that seemed to fold in on themselves, existing in more dimensions than human perception could fully process. Energy patterns flowed across its surface like living light, and at its center, a massive ring-shaped device crackled with power that made the ship's sensors struggle to maintain coherent readings. Captain, Torres reported, his voice tight with suppressed awe. The structure appears to be approximately 50 kilometers in diameter, but the mass readings are inconsistent. It's as if different parts of the station exist in different gravitational frameworks. Dimensional architecture, Dr. Vasquez confirmed. The Old Ones guided the Emperor to construct something that incorporates space-time manipulation into its basic structure. We're looking at a fusion of human technology and alien design principles. Major Chen was studying the tactical display with professional concern. Captain, I'm detecting multiple weapon systems integrated into the station's structure. But the energy signatures are unlike anything in our military databases. Can we approach safely? Unknown, ma'am. The weapon systems appear to be dormant, but given the exotic nature of the technology involved, I can't guarantee they won't activate in response to our presence. Janice activated the ship's communication array. Attention, Project Void's Eye Control Station. This is Captain Janice Corwell of Internal Intelligence, operating under emergency authority granted by the Imperial Senate. Respond immediately. The reply came not as an audio transmission, but as a direct neural contact that made every person on the bridge stagger under its intensity. The voice that spoke in their minds carried overtones of vast age and cosmic indifference. Mortal creatures, you arrived too late to prevent the great return. The dimensional barriers weaken with each passing moment. Soon, the Old Ones shall reclaim their rightful dominion over this fragment of reality. Who are you? Janice demanded, fighting off the disorientation caused by the mental contact. I am the Keeper of the Threshold, appointed by the First Dynasty to guard this nexus until the barriers fall. The Emperor served his purpose well, though he proved disappointingly fragile in the end. But his work is complete. The cascade cannot be stopped. Dr. Vasquez was studying the readings from the station's central ring device. Captain, the dimensional breach system is approximately 93% charged. At current power levels, cascade initiation will occur in approximately 57 minutes. Can we disrupt the charging process? Not from here. We need to penetrate the station's defenses and access the primary control systems directly. The Keeper's voice echoed in their minds again. You may attempt to board our vessel if you choose. We welcome the opportunity to demonstrate the futility of mortal opposition to cosmic inevitability. Major Chen looked up from her tactical console. Captain, whatever's controlling that station is either supremely confident or supremely stupid. They're not even attempting to prevent our approach. Or they're supremely prepared, Torres added grimly. The energy readings from that structure suggest defensive capabilities that could vaporize our ship without difficulty. If they're allowing us to approach, it's because they believe we pose no real threat. Janice considered their options, knowing that each passing minute brought them closer to galactic catastrophe. Torres, scan for any weaknesses in the station's structure. Shen, prepare a boarding party with full combat gear. Vasquez, I want you to analyze the dimensional architecture and see if you can identify any way to disrupt it from the inside. Captain, Dr. Vasquez said hesitantly, there's something else. The neural contact we just experienced suggests that whatever's controlling the station has capabilities that go beyond advanced technology. We may be dealing with an actual Old One entity, not just their human agents. All the more reason to stop it before the barriers fall completely and more of them arrive. Janice replied. If we're facing one of these entities, at least it's only one. The IS Vigilance approached the station slowly, its sensors probing for any sign of hostile activity. But the alien structure remained passive, its weapon systems dormant, as if its controllers were indeed confident that the approaching humans posed no meaningful threat. Docking bay detected, Torres reported. The station's extending some kind of docking tube to interface with our airlocks. Or it's extending a trap, Major Chen muttered. Probably both, Janice acknowledged. But we're out of alternatives. Maintain the ship at full readiness. If this goes badly, retreat immediately and try to warn the rest of the galaxy about what's coming. The boarding party consisted of Janice, Torres, Major Chen, and 6 of the ship's best security personnel, all equipped with quantum armor and weapons designed to function in exotic energy environments. As they prepared to enter the station, Dr. Vasquez pulled Janice aside. Captain, there's something you should know about the dimensional cascade process. According to the theoretical models, once the barriers fall below a certain threshold, the process becomes irreversible even if the generating equipment is destroyed. We may already be past that point. Then we'd better hope the theoretical models are wrong, Janice replied. Because if they're not, we're about to become the last free humans in the galaxy. The airlock cycled open, revealing a corridor that seemed to stretch far beyond what the station's external dimensions should have allowed. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent patterns that hurt to look at directly, and the air carried an ozone scent mixed with something that reminded Janice unpleasantly of funeral incense. Stay close together, she ordered as the boarding party advanced into the station. And be ready for anything. We're operating outside the normal rules of physics now. Their footsteps echoed strangely in the corridor, creating harmonics that suggested vast spaces beyond the visible walls. As they progressed deeper into the station, the dimensional distortions became more pronounced, with doorways that led to rooms that couldn't possibly fit within the structure's geometry. Captain, Torres whispered, checking his tricorder readings. The quantum flux in this area is off the charts. The very structure of space-time is being manipulated on a scale I didn't think was possible. The old ones had eons to perfect their technology, Major Chin replied, her weapon at ready as she scanned for threats. This is probably child's play compared to what they're capable of when fully active. They reached what appeared to be the station's central control room, a vast chamber dominated by the massive ring device they had seen from outside. But the ring was only part of a complex array of equipment that incorporated both recognizable human technology and devices that seemed to bend the laws of physics simply by existing. And standing before the central control console, apparently waiting for their arrival, was a figure that had once been human but was now something far more troubling. "Welcome, mortals," said the thing that had been Emperor Maximilian IX, though his body showed clear signs of dimensional reconstruction. "Did you truly believe that eliminating one vessel would stop a plan that has been in development for millions of years?" Janice felt her blood chill as she realized the implications. "You're supposed to be dead. Death is a concept with limited meaning when one serves masters who exist beyond the normal boundaries of mortality," the reconstructed Emperor replied. "The old ones gathered the scattered quantum patterns of my consciousness and reconstructed them in a form better suited to their purposes." Behind the Emperor, the massive ring device continued to build toward Cascade Threshold, its exotic energies warping the very air around it. They had less than 40 minutes to prevent the end of reality as they knew it, and they were facing an enemy who had already died once and come back stronger. The final confrontation had begun. The reconstructed Emperor Maximilian IX stood before the dimensional cascade device like a grotesque parody of imperial authority, his form flickering between human appearance and something that existed in geometries beyond normal perception. The crown that had once symbolized his earthly power had been replaced by a circlet of crystallized void energy that pulsed with the rhythm of cosmic forces. "You cannot comprehend the magnificence of what approaches," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that made the boarding party's enhanced armor strain to filter out psychically damaging frequencies. "When the barriers fall and the old ones return, the chaos and suffering that has characterized mortal existence will be replaced by perfect cosmic order." Captain Janice Corwell raised her quantum rifle, its targeting system struggling to maintain a lock on the Emperor's dimensionally unstable form. "The only thing your masters offer is extinction disguised as transcendence. We've seen the historical records. Every civilization that listened to their promises simply disappeared. They were absorbed into a higher order of existence," the Emperor replied. "Their individual consciousness joined with entities of cosmic significance. It is an honor beyond mortal understanding." Major Chin had been studying the control systems while the Emperor spoke, looking for any weakness they could exploit. "Captain," she whispered through the comm system, "the Cascade device has multiple redundant control matrices. Even if we could damage the primary systems, the backup protocols would maintain the dimensional breach process. Then we'll have to destroy the entire station," Janice replied. The Emperor laughed, a sound that seemed to echo from spaces beyond the visible room. "Destroy the station?" My dear Captain, this facility exists partially outside normal space-time. Your weapons cannot significantly damage something that incorporates transdimensional architecture. Torres was running quantum scans of the room, searching desperately for any technological solution to their predicament. Captain, the dimensional cascade is now at 97% charge. We have less than 30 minutes before point of no return. But there is something else. Dr. Vasquez's voice came through the comm from the ship. I've been analyzing the energy patterns from the cascade device, and I think I've found something significant. The dimensional barriers aren't being destroyed, they're being converted into something else, something that maintains the structural integrity of space-time while allowing the old ones to pass through. Meaning what, exactly? Janice demanded while keeping her weapon trained on the Emperor. Meaning that if we could reverse the conversion process, we might be able to not only stop the cascade but actually strengthen the dimensional barriers beyond their original configuration. The old ones would be locked out permanently. The Emperor's form solidified suddenly, his face showing the first sign of genuine concern since their arrival. Impossible. The conversion process is irreversible. The old ones have tested it across multiple realities. Maybe, Dr. Vasquez continued, but they've never tested it against someone who understood the fundamental principles involved. The Emperor may have been their vessel, but the actual technical work was done by human scientists who left traces of their original design philosophy in the system architecture. Torres suddenly looked up from his tricorder with excitement. Captain, Dr. Vasquez is right. I'm detecting quantum resonance patterns in the cascade device that match standard Imperial engineering protocols. The human scientists modified the alien design to incorporate safety features that the old ones may not be aware of. What kind of safety features? Major Chen asked, her tactical mind immediately grasping the implications. Emergency shutdown protocols built into the quantum matrix itself. But they can only be activated by someone with Imperial-level authorization codes. All eyes turned to the reconstructed Emperor, who had begun to back away from the control console as understanding dawned on his transformed features. You cannot force me to cooperate. My consciousness has been restructured according to Old One imperatives. I am incapable of acting against their interests. Maybe, Janice said, advancing toward the control console with her weapon still trained on the Emperor. But you're also incapable of stopping us from trying to activate those protocols ourselves. The authorization codes are quantum encrypted to my specific brainwave patterns, the Emperor said, but his voice carried a note of uncertainty. Only I can access them, and I will not. Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled through the comm system with sudden excitement. Captain, what if the encryption is keyed to the original Emperor's brainwave patterns, not the reconstructed version? If the old ones rebuilt his consciousness but didn't perfectly replicate the quantum signature? Torres was already scanning the Emperor with his quantum sensors. The brainwave patterns are approximately 94% consistent with Imperial records, but there are significant variances in the quantum substructure. It's possible that the original authorization codes are still accessible if we can find a way to stimulate the remaining human elements of his consciousness. Stimulate them how? Major Chen asked. The old-fashioned way, Janice replied grimly. Through emotional shock and psychological trauma. If there's any part of the original Emperor still buried in that reconstructed consciousness, we need to bring it to the surface. She turned to address the Emperor directly. Your name is Maximilian Aurelius Constantine IX. You were born on Terra Nova 47 years ago. Your favorite food is Altarian honey cakes. You have a scar on your left hand from a childhood accident involving a malfunctioning gravitic stabilizer. You once told me that the greatest burden of rule was knowing that every decision affected trillions of lives. The Emperor's form flickered, his reconstructed features showing momentary traces of human uncertainty. Those are simply data points gathered during the reconstruction process. You spent 18 months negotiating peace between the crystalline hierarchies and the organic collective because you believed that every sentient species had the right to exist according to its own nature. Janice continued relentlessly. You personally visited the survivors of the Proxima disaster and promised them that the Empire would never again allow corporate negligence to endanger civilian populations. Stop, the Emperor said, his voice beginning to fracture along the lines between human memory and alien reconstruction. You cried when you signed the order to evacuate the Sigma Draconis system because the star was going nova, even though the evacuation saved 2 billion lives, because you knew that 16,000 years of human history were being lost forever. The Emperor staggered, his form becoming increasingly unstable as competing elements of his consciousness struggled for dominance. Those memories, they are irrelevant to the cosmic order that approaches. And 3 months ago, when the visions first started, you were terrified because you realized that something was manipulating your thoughts, and you didn't know how to fight it, Janice said, her voice softening slightly. You tried to resist, didn't you? Part of you knew that what you were being guided to do would destroy everything you had spent your life protecting. I did try to resist, the Emperor whispered, his voice suddenly recognizably human. But they were so patient, so persuasive. They showed me visions of power beyond imagination, of technologies that could make the Empire eternal. But now I can see what they really intended. Torres was monitoring the quantum fluctuations around the Emperor with growing excitement. Captain, his brainwave patterns are shifting toward the original configuration. The authorization protocols might be accessible now. Majesty, Janice said gently. We need those shutdown codes. Not for the Empire, not for political power, but for the survival of every living being in the galaxy. You have the chance to undo the damage that was done through you. The Emperor looked at the cascade device, its energy output now approaching critical threshold. The codes, they're tied to my deepest memories, the ones the old ones couldn't completely suppress without destroying my usefulness to them. He approached the control console slowly, his hands trembling as he reached toward the quantum interface. Authorization, Maximilian Aurelius Constantine IX, by the grace of Cosmos and the will of the people, Emperor of the Intergalactic Empire, guardian of all life within the Imperial domain. The console responded with a chime of recognition, and suddenly the room was filled with holographic displays showing the status of dimensional breach devices across 17 star systems. But more importantly, a new option had appeared on the primary control screen. Emergency Protocol 77 Alpha, Dimensional Barrier Reinforcement. Do it, Janice urged. Activate the reinforcement protocol. The Emperor's hand hovered over the control, his consciousness still torn between human loyalty and alien conditioning. If I do this, the old ones will not forgive the betrayal. They will ensure that my punishment extends beyond any mortal understanding of suffering. If you don't do it, there won't be anything left to suffer, Major Chim pointed out. They're planning to absorb all of galactic civilization into themselves. Your individual fate becomes irrelevant in the face of universal extinction. Majesty, Janice said quietly, you have the chance to be remembered not as the Emperor who nearly destroyed the galaxy, but as the one who saved it. Your sacrifice could protect trillions of lives for eons to come. Emperor Maximilian IX looked around the control room one final time, his gaze taking in the faces of the humans who had risked everything to stop the cosmic catastrophe he had unwittingly enabled. Then he smiled, a genuinely human expression that transformed his reconstructed features. For the Empire, he said simply, and activated Emergency Protocol 77 Alpha. The effect was immediate and spectacular. Energy that had been building toward dimensional cascades suddenly reversed course, flowing back through the quantum conduits toward the 17 breach devices scattered across the galaxy. The massive ring in the control room began to spin in the opposite direction, its exotic emissions taking on a crystalline quality that spoke of barriers being rebuilt rather than torn down. Dimensional cascade interrupted, Torres reported with barely suppressed joy. Barrier reinforcement protocol is propagating through the quantum network. Estimated time to completion, 17 minutes. But their celebration was premature. As the old one's carefully constructed plan began to unravel, the response from the entities trapped between dimensions was swift and terrible. The station began to shake as cosmic forces that had been building for eons were suddenly redirected into violent chaos. "The Old Ones are not pleased," the Emperor said with remarkable understatement, his form beginning to dissolve as the alien influence that had reconstructed him withdrew in fury. "They're attempting to collapse this station into the dimensional void. We have perhaps 10 minutes before the implosion reaches critical mass." "Can we escape?" Major Chen asked. "The station's docking systems are locked down," Torres reported after checking his readings. "We're trapped here until the barrier reinforcement is complete." Janice activated her comm system. "Vigilance, this is the captain. Prepare for emergency evacuation procedures. We may need to attempt a transporter rescue under extreme dimensional distortion conditions." Dr. Vasquez's voice came back immediately. "Captain, transporter systems won't function reliably in the current quantum environment. The dimensional fluctuations would scatter your quantum signatures across multiple realities." As if to emphasize the point, the station lurched again, and several of the control room's walls began to fade into translucency, revealing glimpses of the void between dimensions where vast shapes moved with malevolent purpose. "Then we'll have to see this through to the end," Janice said with calm acceptance. "If the barrier reinforcement completes successfully, our mission will be accomplished regardless of our personal survival." The Emperor, his form now barely maintaining coherence, managed one final communication. "Captain, thank you for helping me remember who I was supposed to be. Perhaps that is worth whatever punishment awaits me in the spaces beyond reality." As the station continued its inexorable collapse toward dimensional implosion, the small group of humans stood together in the failing control room, watching the progress indicators that showed the galaxy's salvation growing closer with each passing second. They had chosen duty over survival, wisdom over loyalty, and the greater good over personal safety. In 16 minutes, they would discover whether their sacrifice had been sufficient to preserve the reality they had sworn to protect. 6 months after the Void Nexus incident, Senator Lyra Corvin, now serving as interim empress pending the selection of a new imperial dynasty, stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed memorial station at the edge of the Void Nebula. Through the reinforced transparisteel, she could see the crystalline structures that marked the former location of the dimensional cascade device, structures that now served as a monument to the sacrifice of those who had saved galactic civilization. The barrier reinforcement protocol had succeeded beyond all expectations. Not only had the Old Ones been permanently locked out of normal spacetime, but the strengthened dimensional boundaries had also eliminated several other cosmic threats that had been quietly infiltrating reality for millennia. The galaxy was more secure than it had been in millions of years. "The final report from the investigation committee," Cardinal Thessarian said as he joined her at the observation window. His scarlet robes had been modified to include silver threads commemorating the heroes of the Void Nexus, and his bearing showed the weight of someone who had helped reshape the moral foundations of an empire. "What did they conclude?" Corvin asked, accepting the data pad from the Cardinal's hands. "That Captain Corwell and her team acted with exceptional valor and wisdom in circumstances that transcended normal concepts of duty and loyalty. Their actions have been classified as necessary treason in service of universal survival. It's a new legal category that the judicial philosophers are still trying to fully define." Corvin smiled at the bureaucratic attempt to categorize actions that defied conventional understanding. "And the crew of the Vigilance? Promoted posthumously to the highest honors the Empire can bestow. Dr. Vasquez has been credited with developing the theoretical framework that made the barrier reinforcement possible. Major Chin and Lieutenant Commander Torres are being recognized for tactical and technical excellence under impossible conditions. And Captain Corwell? She's been awarded the Order of Cosmic Sacrifice, the first such honor granted in 800 years. The citation reads, "For choosing wisdom over obedience, truth over tradition, and the survival of all life over personal loyalty." Through the observation window, they could see the research vessels that had been studying the crystalline formations for months, trying to understand the fundamental changes that had been wrought in the fabric of spacetime itself. The structures seemed to pulse with a gentle light that scientists described as stabilized dimensional energy. a phenomenon that had never been observed before the Void Nexus incident. Have we learned anything about what happened to them in the final moments? Corvin asked. Thessarian nodded slowly. The quantum archaeologists believe they found traces of consciousness patterns preserved in the crystalline matrices. It's possible that Captain Corwell and her team didn't simply die. They may have been absorbed into the dimensional reinforcement structure itself, becoming part of the barriers that protect our reality. So they're still out there, in some sense? According to the theoretical physicists, they may have achieved a form of existence that transcends normal mortality while remaining fundamentally human in their consciousness patterns. Dr. Vasquez would probably appreciate the irony. They accomplished what the Old Ones promised their followers, but without losing their essential humanity. Corvin studied the memorial plaque that had been installed on the observation deck, bearing the names of the 8 humans whose sacrifice had preserved galactic civilization. Below their names was an inscription that had become the unofficial motto of the new imperial administration. In choosing wisdom over obedience, they chose life over law, and in doing so, honored the highest law of all. What about the political situation? She asked. How are the member systems responding to the transition? Better than expected, Thessarian replied. The truth about Project Void's Eye and the Old One's influence has been shared with all system governments under the highest security classifications. Most are relieved that the Imperial administration is now focused on preventing cosmic threats rather than creating them. And the selection of a new Imperial dynasty? The Conclave of Cardinals and the Senate are working together to develop new criteria for Imperial leadership that include resistance to external manipulation and a deep understanding of cosmic responsibility. It may take years to find candidates who meet the new standards, but the interim government is functioning effectively. A soft chime from the Memorial Station's communication system interrupted their conversation. Your Majesty, came the voice of the station's commanding officer. We're receiving a transmission from the Deep Space Monitoring Array. They want to report something unusual. Patch it through, Corvin replied. The voice of Admiral Sarah Chin, sister of the late Major Chin and now head of the Empire's expanded Cosmic Threat Detection Program, filled the observation deck. Your Majesty, we've been monitoring the dimensional barriers as part of our ongoing security protocols. Over the past week, we've detected what appear to be communication attempts from entities trapped outside normal space-time. The Old Ones? Thessarian asked with concern. Unknown, Your Majesty. But the communication patterns are different from what we observed during the Void Nexus incident. These transmissions seem to be expressing gratitude. Corvin exchanged a glance with the Cardinal. Gratitude for what? We're not certain, but our xenolinguistics team believes the messages may be coming from other civilizations that were trapped in the dimensional spaces along with the Old Ones. The barrier reinforcement may have freed them from eons of imprisonment. Are they seeking passage to our reality? Negative, Your Majesty. The transmissions seem to be simply acknowledgement, a cosmic thank you for actions that liberated them from a situation they couldn't escape on their own. They appear to be returning to their own dimensional frameworks. As Admiral Chen's report concluded, Corvin found herself contemplating the vast implications of their actions 6 months earlier. Not only had they saved their own galaxy from absorption by cosmic predators, but they had also freed unknown numbers of civilizations that had been trapped for millions of years. Captain Corwell and her team couldn't have known the full scope of what they were accomplishing, she said quietly. Perhaps that's what made their sacrifice so powerful, Thessarian replied. They acted not for glory or recognition, but simply because it was the right thing to do. In a universe filled with entities seeking cosmic dominion, there's something profoundly moving about individuals who choose to protect life simply because life is worth protecting. The two leaders stood in contemplative silence, watching the crystalline formations that marked the site of the galaxy's closest brush with extinction. In the months since the Void Nexus incident, the Empire had begun the long process of rebuilding its institutions around principles of wisdom rather than power, cosmic responsibility rather than imperial expansion. It would be a difficult transition, requiring fundamental changes in how civilizations approach the questions of leadership, loyalty, and duty. But it was a transition made possible by 8 individuals who had chosen to break their oaths in service of a higher truth. As the 3 moons of Celestia Prime began to set beyond the nebula's edge, casting prismatic light through the Memorial Station's observation windows, Senator Corvin made a private vow that would guide the Empire's new direction. Never again would political loyalty be allowed to override moral wisdom. And never again would cosmic ambition blind leaders to their fundamental responsibility to protect the lives entrusted to their care. The galaxy would remember the lesson of the Void Nexus, and in remembering, ensure that such a choice would never again be necessary. In the crystalline formations at the nebula's heart, patterns of stabilized dimensional energy pulsed with rhythms that seemed almost like heartbeats, proof that sometimes, the greatest act of loyalty is knowing when to choose a higher allegiance than the one you swore to serve.